This podcast is a collaboration between Costard and Touchstone Productions and the Dads from the Crypt podcast.
It's very clear in this book that you use senses that we only know we have, that we do not use in full.
It's fascinating, Eileen. I think that that my sensory approach to life is very much like Dinah's sensory approach to life. There's a whole undercurrent of information that Dinah knew and couldn't define to me until I could read her language, and that I know and don't define to people because I tend to take it for granted.
Yeah,
I've never met an ugly person unless they wanted to be. I understand the feeling of a handshake when it's well meant.
It's the most amazing thing.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. I'm Alan Katz. Gil will join us shortly. Before we begin, though, you could all probably do this part yourselves. Hit like and subscribe, especially because are you afraid?
Flesh-eating ghouls. For a long time, we humans have been deeply afraid of vampires and zombies.
Send more paramedics.
Fair enough, vampires and zombies are scary. But neither vampires nor zombies
Are real.
Flesh-eating ghouls, on the other hand, are real. They've been living in our shadow for thousands of years, hunting us, feasting on us, treating us
Like food.
But some ghouls are tired of living in the shadow of their food. Those ghouls have decided it's time to leave the shadow.
And put us in our place where we belong.
On the menu,
It's an eat or be eaten world.
Flavored by fear, filled with the monster we should have been afraid of all along.
Flesh-eating ghoul.
Are you afraid?
Better be.
Coming soon.
I very much enjoy writing solo, but I also thoroughly enjoy writing with a partner. Ideally, if it works, it's like adding 1 and 1 and getting 4 or 5. The sum is truly greater than the parts. Writing with a partner forces a writer to get out of their head and into a mutual head, a very strange place, entirely imaginary, where two people suddenly experience the same imagined reality. And then they go and tell a story in it. It's truly transcendent when it happens. I've been very lucky to have had several great writing partners. Of course, this podcast celebrates, among other things, my writing and producing partnership with Gil Adler. I also wrote several scripts for The Outer Limits and sold a couple of TV shows and a feature film with a guy named Scott Nimmerfro. Before his very untimely passing a few years ago, Scott wrote and produced shows like Tales from the Crypt, Pushing Daisies, Hannibal, and Once Upon a Time. I also had the incredible good fortune to meet and then write with today's guest. He's one of America's best-known blind people, in part because he's done so many things despite being blind. At various parts of his long career, Tom Sullivan has sang, acted, written and produced TV and movies. He's written a dozen or so books. He plays golf, he skis, he runs marathons, and he's one of America's most sought-after motivational speakers. After you meet him, you'll get the last part especially. Tom's story is remarkable. Tom is remarkable. Now, one thing that isn't remarkable is the sound quality of a lot of today's episode, and for that I apologize. We had a few technical difficulties on that end, but the content is just so damn uplifting that it comes and it goes. I apologize. But like I said, it's Tom Sullivan. It's worth it. His story will blow your mind. The people he's met along the way will blow your mind. Spoiler alert, they include Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., with whom Tom marched on many occasions. Rights for the disabled and civil rights go hand in hand. His friends like Betty White and the depth of that relationship will blow your mind. They wrote a couple of best-selling books together. Have I made my point? Your mind's about to be blown. Here's Tom. Over the course of your amazing career, you have been an actor, a singer, an entertainer, an author, a producer, a motivational speaker, and an advocate not just for the blind, but for all people facing disadvantage. One could say that your mission is to turn disadvantage into advantage. Yes?
Absolutely. I'm laughing because you and I wrote that. It's
Yeah, it's like I read your website. The first time that I met Tom, I'm remembering Tom and I first met. We were represented by the same talent agency in Los Angeles. The agency, Tom was represented by the principal there, a guy named Jerry Zeitman. And I was represented by one of the junior agents, a guy named Nick Mechanic.
so let's cut to the appropriate chase. We had one old guy and one drugged out guy representing our lives.
Yeah. It was kind of wacky, but
And probably 10 years earlier, I was represented by Larry Bexley, who was at the agency.
Oh my goodness! Well, we have all done better than that agency did, Joe.
At the end of the day, when Jerry was about to introduce me to you, I did not know who you were, and he said, oh, he mentioned introduce. He said that Tom was a well-known, and he quickly said blind person, and I heard the word blonde, and I said, yes, I can see that. And he said, can you also see that he's blind?
Well, it's an interesting thing.
Yeah. And I suddenly saw the dog. Was that Edison at the time?
Yeah, Edison was the dog. And it's interesting that you even brought this up in this context, fellas, because you said to me, what has been your principal life goal? What has it been? It's very clear to me that my goal is maybe summed up when I'm dead. And they write on the tombstone, here lies Tom. He was a husband, father, actor, athlete, author, humanitarian, who, by the way, happens to be blind. If I can, before I leave the planet, if I can move that piece down in terms of public perception, then not only for me, but for anybody with a disability, I'll have had a lot to do with changing perception.
Indeed. And hey, you are a very handsome blonde guy. I must say, that was my first impression. That's a good looking blonde guy. I wish I looked half as good. Anyway, well, we will come to our pairing and what that produced in good time. First, let's reminisce a bit. You started out in Boston. Your mom was Marie, your dad, Tom Sullivan's Sr., nicknamed Porky. Where did Porky come from?
I really don't know if Porky was about the original Porky Pig cartoons, because my father was kind of a short, stocky fellow. Or whether it had something to do with his sexual exploits. I'm not sure why he got Porky, but he clearly lived up to it. He was really a fascinating character. He was born in an area. He was born in Ireland, but when he came to America, he lived in an area called the Leaky Roof. It was called a leaky roof because that's where all the Irish literally lived, in leaky roofs. He was he went on to be a prize fighter. Not very good, but good enough to make enough money to buy a bar. He ended up owning 18 Irish pubs all over Boston. He was, when he found out I was blind, when I was born, in 10 days, he raised $6 million from bookies and bank robbers and jockeys and prize fighters. He had so much to do with making a difference in not just my life, but the lives of so many blind kids. He created beep baseball. Now that's the game that blind people play with a beeper and a softball. He went to IBM, IBM, and got them to create the ability for blind people to bowl. And then when you knock the pins down, it would come up on a braille board, and you could touch the board and learn what pins you had left. He was really an innovator. And you know, Alan, from our conversations, that he and my mother were in absolute juxtaposition, Gil, about who I was supposed to be. She wanted me getting education first in schools for blind kids. He wanted me out on the street with sighted kids. And their conflict was pretty severe, you know, and in the end, their marriage didn't work out. But the point of the story was they represented, in many ways, the dualism of what it was to be a special needs child back then, because nobody really knew what to do with someone like me.
Sure. And we will come to how special your needs were in time as we get back to your story, because you were not going to be penned in like they wanted to pen you in. They and to that end, you were kind of fenced into your backyard,
Yeah.
and that was that seemed to motivate you beyond it, because in time, okay, we'll jump forward a whole lot of years, you became an excellent golfer. You've been quoted as saying, "I've never seen a water hazard. I always have an open shot to the green."
That's right. There's a lot. The only time I've ever lost money on the golf course is when guys think I'm really playing well, and then they start telling me about the water. You know, I hear a lot of that. But yeah, you know, my backyard was, boy, it's fascinating, fellas. It was, they built an 8-foot high chain link fence around the yard, because the theory was keep Tom inside and keep the world outside so Tom won't get hurt. Now, all of this really was hard for me because I had gone to a school for blind children, Perkins, and I hated it. And now here's the fenced-in yard, and down the street from the house, there was a school, a grammar school, with a baseball field.
Where the normal kids.
Normal kids played, yeah, and I could hear the games from my yard, and I would go in the house and get a transistor radio and bring it out and put it on the steps and turn on WHDH and the Boston Red Sox. And my dad had given me a Louisville Slugger bat that had been autographed by Ted Williams. And it was one of my dad's customers. And I would find rocks on the ground and throw them up in the air as the Red Sox played and try to hit the rocks. On this one day, Williams came up in the last of the seventh in a 2-2 game, and he hit one deep into the right field bullpen. And as he hit his home run, I happened to hit the rock and launch it over my fence. And I started to run around the yard, you know, touching the fence, making believe I was running from first, second, third, and I sort of slid into what I thought would be home plate. And there was a kid who was on his way home from the game, a real game. And kids can be cruel. And this little boy came by my fence and he said, "Hey, are you blind?" And I wanted so much to have a friend. I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, you know, that's kind of a stupid game and you're kind of a stupid kid." And then he started chanting. He'd chant, "Blindy, blindy, blindy." And I'd pick up rocks from the ground. And started to throw them at the sound. And obviously he could just step out of the way. And eventually he got tired of it and he went away. And I remember thinking, fellas, that I will never let a fence of any kind, emotional, physical, no fence of any kind will ever limit my life again. Not ever. Then you learn that you can't get there alone. That no matter how determined you are, you can't get there alone. And miracles happen. And Alan, you know this miracle. 2 little boys moved into a house right next door to me. And they were playing ball in their yard. And their names were Billy and Michael Hannon. And I could hear them playing, and I thought, okay, it's come down to this. I've got to get out of this yard. And I grabbed the chain link and pulled myself up on the chain link fence, hand over hand. And I got to the top, and I had no idea how high 8 feet was. But I leaped and crashed on the ground, wind knocked out of me, and the 2 little boys came running up. And the one little boy, Billy Hannon, who's now been my best pal for 65 years, Billy looked down and said, "Wow," he said with his Boston accent, "that was a gnarly fall." He said, yeah. I said, and he said, I'm Billy Hannon. I said, I'm Tom Sullivan and I'm blind. And this little boy looked at me and with the wonder of children, he said, want to play? And from that minute on, I had a best friend. And that opened everything. When Billy taught me to throw a baseball and a football, Billy taught me to wrestle. Billy took me ice skating, you know, and summers, Billy would come and stay with us in a beach cottage and we'd dig clams and fish. And I don't know why I'm jumping, and I know you guys have a bunch.
No. You're actually filling in just fine. So this started, Tom, and we will come back to this because the project that Tom and I worked on when we get to that part of the story was telling this story, Adventures in Darkness. We'll come to that. So
I will tell you though, fellas, there's a great Billy Hannon story that goes in adulthood, and it's worth hearing.
Oh, we will, if you want to, is
it fits this. Billy,
go for it.
His daughter got married 2 years ago, and Patty and I went back for the wedding. And we had, the wedding had every Irish quality. It had music, it had 2 fights. Billy had spent, I love Redbreast Irish whiskey, and he had a bottle at the bar just for him and me. And we're sitting at the bar, and when fathers at weddings get emotional, they really do start to cry and stuff. And Billy was all emotional, and he said, "You remember when we were little kids?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I was your best friend, right?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "And I was the only one that ever loved you, right?" I said, "Yeah, I guess so." He said, "I have to tell you something. I've never had the guts to tell you this." I said, "What?" He said, "Remember the day we went fishing at the town fair in Situate?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You caught your first flounder." I said, "Yeah." You put it in my hands and I learned what a fish was. But I said, "Billy, do you remember I caught 8 more?" He said, "No, you didn't." I said, "Yes, I did. I caught 8 more flounders." He said, "No, you didn't." He said, "I just put it back on the hook 9 times. So best friend.
I'd like a friend like that.
Oh boy. You found your way outside that fence, and you stayed outside that fence, and just as a not only golf, an avid skier, in fact you were even inducted into the Wrestling Hall of Fame in Stillwater, Oklahoma. The physical world has not been an impediment. At some point you started playing the piano in summer resorts in New England, so performing was there early on, yeah?
Well, you know, I had a music teacher in the blind school. Again, another one of the humans. You know, a big part of what we're talking about today, fellas, is this tracking of humans to change the lives of humans. And this fellow was named Hank Santos. He had won the Van Cliburn piano competition in the Soviet Union, but he was a great jazz pianist. And he played in the Air Force band, Glenn Miller Air Force bands. And he realized that I didn't want to play Chopin. And he knew I sang, and he said, "How would you like to learn about the greats, the American Songbook?" And he started to teach me stuff by Ella and Tony Bennett and Joe Williams and Sarah Vaughan. And one day he said, so he'd let me sing, he'd accompany me, and I'd sing instead of taking my normal piano lesson. And one day he said, "I've got some friends coming to the house, and I want you to come over. We'll take you out of school, and I want you to sing for them." And I did. And after I'd sung 5 or 6 songs, they all seemed to like it. This one fellow came up to me and he said, "Tom," he said, "my friend Hank," my teacher, "says that you're a really angry blind kid." I said, "Why is that?" And I started my whole litany of the crap, right? The kids won't play with me, and I may be great at being blind, but I suck at being sighted, and I'm not sure what my world's going to be like. And he said, "Tom," he said, "I think you're feeling pretty sorry for yourself." He said, You know, you're an A student, you're a terrific athlete, you're obviously musical. Oh, he said, I forgot, I haven't introduced myself. He said, I'm Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. King had gone to Boston University with my teacher. And I stayed involved with Dr. King for the rest of his life. I was there on the March on Washington when I was a sophomore in high school. Through him, I got to know Roy Wilkins and H.Rap Brown and Stokely Carmichael and Jesse Jackson. And I became not only an advocate for disability, but for civil rights, but only because of an accident. Don't you think, fellas, life's a process of making the most of a series of accidents?
Holy cow, yes.
Yeah, it really is. And the wonder of getting older is that you realize how much more important the accidents are. You know, that they have to count. I don't know if you guys are going through this, but boy, days are going too fast for me now. It's like I'd love to just sort of slow them down. And yesterday I played golf and I had maybe the best round I've had in forever. I shot in a really difficult golf course. I shot 84, which for a blind person is really pretty good. And I thought, I wish I had been as positive as I always am. Instead of it, I thought, is this the last great round? Will I ever play that kind of golf again? And I don't know. But I do know that, boy, I'll tell you now, fellas, each day for me counts more than it ever did. Now, when I hug Patty goodnight, that is the single most important thing every day. We lost Edison, you know, that you knew around, and I'm getting a brand new guide dog that comes in 2 weeks. His name is Theodore, and he's a golden retriever. And I'm so excited to have that independence again, you know, the mobility of independence. It's when I was growing up, everybody said that I would be a dependent person. Mm. And everything that you know about me, Alan, has been about my passion to express independence.
Oh gosh, yes, yeah. And yeah.
You know how when we can blessed to write together, we're locked in our work as interdependent. That's the magic of life.
Indeed.
It's the interdependence. And as a blind guy, I was so angry, it took me years to get there, to get to a place where I said it's okay to be interdependent. You know, so there's a value in it.
Yeah, they're for what the rest of us rely on just to get along was an obstacle, in a sense, to your perception of how you needed to just see yourself.
Wow, thank you for saying it that way. Yeah, to see yourself, that's a really interesting thing. You know, I often wonder, not just in terms of seeing myself, but I often wonder what Patty feels. You know that Patty happens to be a really beautiful woman. But I wonder when she dresses up for dinner and comes down the stairs and I'm waiting, like every husband. I wonder if she thinks, I wish she could see me. There's a melancholy about that. And then I tell her all the time about the fact that I'm interested in looking at people inside out, not outside in. I mean, for me, Alan, you're 6'8", in shape, you know.
Good God, you have no idea.
But you know the point I'm making.
Oh yeah. It's
part of the labeling. Yeah, that's the goddamn. I guess what can say. It's the goddamn worst part of our society is this categorization.
You have to be understanding about how shallow the sighted world is, Tom. We're all about appearances. We want to judge all books by their cover. It takes a little more time to actually crack the book and read what's inside. You because of your situation have always got to read what's inside.
Well, thank you for that perception. Yeah, I think I'm also lucky. Here's an interesting thought. I know we're all over the place here, but that's it.
Hey, whatever.
I haven't said this to people. I have never met an ugly person unless they wanted to. Unless they looked at life from that place.
An excellent point. I have never met an ugly person unless they wanted to be. That's fantastic.
They
Love it.
make, don't you think?
It's a t-shirt.
Well, if it is.
not that that means anything to you. God, that was pointless. That was point. It's an audio book. Oh, geez.
It's true, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, no, it is. It's absolutely true.
a quick story. I was working for Good Morning America, and they sent me to interview. Voice America had just done 10, and I got assigned to do a big profile on for BBC, and the guys on the cruise, around the water cooler, are saying, "Jesus Christ, we're sending a goddamn blind guy to interview a 10. This is ridiculous." Well, I thought about it and thought, I've got to find a way to do this interview in a different way. I've got to be able to ask her something that makes it feel special. So the first question is, I said, well, people talk about you as a physical 10, but I can't look at you. So why should I like you?
It's perfect. It's a great question. It's perfect.
Yeah, and she started to cry. And she said, that's the problem, isn't it? She said, they don't know how much I love my husband, John, and how much I love animals, and they don't understand that I need, and I'm not some dummy with a good ass. She said, I'm interested in everything about life. But when people consider me, they're looking at a pair of tits. So, you start to frame this stuff and think, boy, we really live in a system of labels. Can't we get out of our own way?
The first, you wrote a novel, a book. It wasn't a book called "If You Could See What I Hear."
Right.
An autobiographical piece about Perkins, your neighborhood, Providence College, and then Harvard. And that got turned into a feature film with Mark Singer playing you. You kind of got that. If you could see what I hear, that was a perfect summation of how you were experiencing life.
I think so. It also was meant as an invitation. There are 5, and everybody knows it, but they don't. There are 5 glorious senses. And the sight is the dominant sense. I mean, those of you who can see, it's so dominant that, okay, I'll give you an example. So I'm still a runner, a morning runner. And yesterday I ran with these 4 guys. We ran on the beach. I was listening there on Redondo Beach, where here in Palos Verdes, there are 15 different kinds of waves that you can hear. All the way from the ones that at high tide, that where the rush of waves meets the outgoing sand, and it sounds as if Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier were exchanging body shots. To the ones at low tide, where the waves ebb and flow over the sandbars, and that sounds like a cannonade in a war zone. There are 11 different textures of sand on the beach, if you look for it, on my beach. There are over 50 kinds of birds that you can hear. And up above the beach, at the 4-mile mark of this land, which now takes me a lot longer than it used to. But above the beach, there's a restaurant called Millie's. And at 7 o'clock, it's cooking bacon, eggs, and sausages, and hot coffee, and muffins. And this stuff, the smells come drifting down and blend, fellas, with eucalyptus and orange blossom and lilac and ocean kelp and weed. And it's a sensorial joy that anyone could appreciate if they took the time. So this is the difference. This is why I do so much writing for children's books, because I'll never be able to see. That's not going to happen. But anyone can turn on the senses. That's one of the legacies I hope I leave. that's a gift available to everyone if they want it. So it's a marvelous sensory world if you're just willing to find out about it.
You've on the subject of books, you've written a few in addition to If You Could See What I Hear.
Yeah.
At some point you hooked up with Betty White, and you began the first book you wrote with her was Leading Lady, Dinah's story about your dog before Edison. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Dinah was a golden retriever, and she worked for me for 10 years. Well, first, I should tell you that Betty White is the reason Patty and I are married. I was playing in that little bar you talked about in Cape Cod, and Betty and her husband Alan Ludden, the great gameship guy, we would do summer stock at the Cape Cod Playhouse, and they would come into my bar every night, and I would play their favorite songs, and sometimes they'd get up and sing. But I was at the time. Now I'm this young Harvard guy, blind piano player. And I'm chasing every girl in the joint a minute. And so this one night, the bartender leans over the bar and he says to me, Tom, holy Christ, he said, there's a girl in here. He said, 5'10", legs to heaven. He said, you better figure out how to talk with her. Well, thank God she leaned over the bar and she said, excuse me. She said, can you play By the Time I Get to Phoenix? I said, yeah, I can play. She said, so I sang it, and by the end, she had a couple of drinks, and so she's kind of crying, and she said, do you mind if I ask you something? She said, do you mind if I ask how you went blind? I said, well, I don't really like to talk about it. She said, oh, come on. I said, well, I was an F-4 pilot in Vietnam. I got shot down, and in prison, in Hilton Prison, and you're the first girl I've met since I got out. And Betty White hears it, and she's laughing her ass off. And she said, young lady, he is so full of shit. But then she said, there's a girl, Tom, who comes in here every night and sits alone at a table listening to you sing. And if you could see her eyes, you would never date anyone else. And she grabbed me by the arm and dragged me over. And she said, young lady, what's your name? And the girl said, I'm Patty. And Betty said, this is Tom Sullivan, sit down. And she pushed me into a chair, and Betty made it possible for Patty and I now to be married 55 years.
Yeah.
So that's how it started. So is the story of Dinah, the guide dog, my life with Dinah. And then when Dinah's eyes, oddly enough, went bad, Betty had lost Alan, and Dinah went to live with Betty. And so the book is the story, my stories with Dinah and Betty's stories with Dinah. And it was really an amazing success. It went through the roof. It was a Times bestseller and a whole lot of things, largely due to Betty, not me. But
you helped a lot. Come on.
Betty, I had the privilege, Alan, of being Betty's trustee. And when Betty left us 2.5 years ago, it was an incredible privilege to give away her quite vast estate to all the causes she cared about. This was a woman who was way past the parts she played. She was brilliant, funny, wonderfully rich in interests. We shared.
She became a cultural icon.
Yeah.
She certainly proved F. Scott Fitzgerald wrong. She had at least a second act, a third act. She had remarkable, even if that was just a second act. Wow, she was like the most popular person and certainly in this country.
Was.
And she loved her.
She recreated herself all the way along. She was the queen of the double entendre. She would say, Gil, did you ever have a chance to direct her?
No, I never did. I always wanted to meet her, and I loved Alan Ludden. I used to watch Password as a kid. I was addicted to Password, and I was addicted to him.
He was wonderful. And they do Password now. Is it Jimmy Fallon that does it now? But it's not. Alan did it as if don't you think, fellas? It was as if we were in the living room, And we were all sitting around a coffee table, and he made the game so personal.
Yeah, he did.
Gil, they fell in love on Password. They met on Password, and Alan, well, I wasn't there obviously, but Alan went backstage, and Bob Stewart, who was the most famous game producer of all in the world, Bob created Price is Right, he created Password, he created Jeopardy. Guy was a genius. But Bob Stewart, Alan came backstage and said, Bob, I'm going to marry that girl. It was just a love, a true love story between them. I've never actually come across a couple any more in love than they were. So it was a privilege for Patty and I. They became on, because I came from such a beat up, broken home. They became our role model. And as Alan, you noted that writing the book with Betty and then serving, Betty and I were both president of the Morris Animal Foundation, which is the largest research foundation for dogs, cats, horses, and wildlife in the world. We had the common experience with Dinah. Betty became grandson to my children, Blythe and Tom. Came to all of Blythe's horse shows and Tom's Little League games. It's been an amazing, beautiful thing that Betty became part of our family. My professional life got changed by Michael Landon. Michael,
Right.
we did The Highway to Heavens, and that was how I first started to write. Thank God I had you, because I was a horrible TV writer. I'm a good novelist and a good storyteller, but when it comes to the camera, I'm not. Anyway,
there's a special dispensation for a person who doesn't fully appreciate what a camera does per se.
I love when a Jewish guy use the word dispensation.
Yes, I have a special dispensation to use that word. Actually,
The key there was what he taught me most of all. So when I was doing Highway to Heaven, both as writing and acting on it, I was at the height of my career. I was doing Carson every 2 weeks. I was, on every talk show that there was, I was part of. Patty and I were raising money a lot for blind kids. I had just sung the national anthem for the Super Bowl
in 1976.
Orange Bowl in Miami. To honor America, we proudly present our national anthem as sung by Mr. Tom Sullivan and the cast of Up With People.
What day can you see by the dawn's early light? What so proudly we hailed.
So I was flying really high, and we went. I was doing an episode of Highway to Heaven, and at the end of the episode, Michael said, "We're going to cut the day short because the Red Sox are playing. We're all going to go out." He took everybody to a bar down the street, and we're all having fun. And I mean, smoking cigars and playing pool and drinking beer, and it's a wonderful thing. And this guy came up to me and said, "Are you Tom Sullivan?" I said, "Yeah." He said, I said, "I have a 3-year-old blind child." And he said, "I thought you were really a hero." He said, "You're a jerk." Well, I wasn't. I was just with a bunch of guys having fun. The next day, Michael Landon came to work, and he said to me, "You really had a rough time with that guy, didn't you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Tom, you better learn something." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Whatever you do in the privacy of your own home is up to you. Whatever you share with your friends, that's up to you. But once you step out that door, you belong to them." And for the rest of my professional life, I never forgot it. And that's what performers have lost today. I don't hear young performers today express themselves with gratitude. Everything that we get, when I was really in this, everything we get comes from the gratitude we should feel toward those who made it happen. And it's not part of show business now.
Social media has created a strange dynamic between performer and fan base. It's a very strange relationship.
I think so. You know, when Patty finished, now Patty Sullivan, my Patty, has a best-selling book out right now. That's a wonderful story. She has written a book called Betty White, Pearls of Wisdom, Life Lessons from Beloved American Treasure. And it's Patty's story over a 50-year period with Betty. And what has been amazing is that we hired social media people to do the job that used to be done by PR companies.
Right.
Yeah.
How fellas, and this is a new one. This is Gil. If you and Alan go back into television together, it's a bizarre world now. And Alan, even the fact that we're doing a podcast, fellas, think about that. It started with AM radio, then AM and FM radio, talk show radio, and look where we are.
Gil and I are taking a project out into the marketplace in the
Near
now. Yes, in the very near future. And it's funny, part of how we're rolling it out, of course, will involve social media, but part of our creative team are two people who are part of the creative team because of their social media presence. They have created a website and a podcast and a YouTube channel called Dead Meat, which does body counts in all horror movies. Every single death
Yes, I know about it.
Well, Dead Meat has 6 million subscribers. 6 million. So we got involved with one of them, with Chelsea Rebecca, the one of them, on a reading we did for a script. And they're both incredibly talented people, and they've created this thing, as they would tell you, they're fans. They were horror movie fans who have created a niche for themselves in the very business that they grew up loving.
That's astounding.
But that is what the technology and social media suddenly allows, a transference of people from one point. It's like the old game Chutes and Ladders. It's weird. It's something you can get from one point to another with unexpected speed. But podcasting can have the same effect.
YouTube, so this is wonderful that I'm hearing it, Gil and Alan, because I Jesus, for all the 15 books I've written and all the stuff I've been blessed to do, I feel like a dinosaur. You know, I do know now, though, that if we go forward as a group with podcasts, all the things I did for Good Morning America, the against all odds stories, the whole good news kind of story.
Yeah.
This stuff. And if podcast is the vehicle, boy, I'm happy to get on that train.
You are, as we said the other day when we were talking, and we'll do this talk at greater length when we're finished this interview. No, you were made for podcasting, Tom, because it's radio. You are the perfect person. Your perceptions of this world were made for podcasting. But we'll come to that.
You say that. I'm so comfortable in the verbal world.
Yeah.
And
a world of sound. And that's what it is.
Yeah.
So among the other books you did, we'll just go through them because I'm going to get to the good part. So yeah, there's a book called Common Sense, Special Parent, Special Child, You Are Special, and Seeing Lessons, 14 Life Secrets, which was recognized by the New York City chapter of the National Multiple Sclerosis Society's books as one of their books for a better life.
Yeah, I've been. Yeah, thank you. That book did extremely well, and it's wonderful to be this age and still love to write.
Here.
I've just finished a new novel that I feel so excited about because it fulfilled all of my Irish past. I went bore your audience, but it's called The Southeast. And the theory is it tells the story of three fellows who represent all of what is South Boston, the Irish. This is a perfect vehicle for a 9-part kind of series that for Affleck and Damon. I love this particular book, and it's interesting, isn't it? As writers, you guys know this. We come to places in our lives that fit the time we write. You know what I mean? This particular novel, I could not have written this 20 years ago.
Oh, sure.
I wouldn't have had the particular gift. And it's wonderful to think that even at this age, you can still continue to see your skill set, your craft mature. You guys know this as much as anybody, that it's been a horrible thing that mature writers, senior writers in show business, in our business, have been so abused by what is the system now.
It's very ageist. Yeah, very, very intensely ageist. Yeah.
One of my best pals, I know, Alan, you did, Bill Lynn, who wrote Fame and did Eight Is Enough and a whole lot of television over the years, Bonanza. For the last 5 or 6 years, Bill kept writing scripts and he couldn't even get them seen, and he died last year. And it broke my heart because his talent didn't change. He still had the gift.
In fact, it deepens. We do get better at what we do with age because we know more, and it just finds its way into the work. Yeah. No, I'm a far better writer today than I could possibly have been back when you and I were first writing, Gil, or when you and I were writing together, Tom. The vicissitudes of my own travels have, scars, but I think they made me, at the end of the day, far better at telling the story of life than previous vicissitudes.
It's because you've lived life. We're better storytellers because of the experiences we've had.
And we're a storyteller is a prism. We simply hold our prism that inside our head up to the light, and whatever refracts, that's our art.
It is. It's an interesting thing that the greatest, I was kidding about writing and for television or for movies and struggling about setting scenes and camera and the stuff that is visual that I don't, and yet I've gotten pretty good at being able to almost see a visual picture of things. It's again.
Well, but let's get at that, because when you and I were put together by Jerry Zeitman, once I said, "Oh, I see he's blind in addition to blonde. Okay, he's both. He's a twin threat. He's a double threat." The book that they wanted me to help you adapt into a screenplay was Adventures in Darkness.
Yeah. The three of us should still make that. It's a fantastic story.
That was a hey, look, we at the end of the day, we set it up. We set it up. Crusader Films, Phil Anschutz's company. We had Martha Coolidge, a really good director, attached. We even went out to her horse ranch out north of LA one day to talk about all kinds of production issues. The only thing that got in the way of that movie getting made was the casting of the boy, and we were all banking on Freddie Highmore.
Yeah.
It was do or die, and it just getting onto his schedule before he went through puberty was our problem.
And then Anschutz bought the Ray Charles story.
Yeah, then that happened, and then so another blind guy beat us.
Whatever happened to that project, and what happened to where do the rights live right now?
Yeah, there you go. They must be back with you at this point after all this time. Certainly the rights to the book, you could start all over again. No one owns the rights to your story.
They don't.
That screenplay is all that they owned.
Well, yeah, but remember, the good part of this was we took it back, wrote another draft. They didn't buy the draft, so it's ours.
Right. It was it was a fascinating project to work on because part of my assignment was to get as best I could inside your head and to try to understand how you, for want of a better word, saw the world.
Yeah, that was, I think this is not guys stroking you guys here, but one of your brilliant pieces was, you asked me at the beginning of the show here about my backyard. And Alan wrote the most beautiful scene of the way Tom would understand the world from inside there. And the theory was going to be shooting it from Tom's point of view. The camera would shoot from Tom's point of view and allow sound to be what you really learn. So you'd be, camera would right on, the camera would be show Tom. What you'd be really involved in was the sound of the kids down the street, the sound of the neighborhood, the sound, whatever it was. And that was how Tom saw the world. And that's all Alan Katz. It was a beautiful piece of work.
Well, thank you. Like I said, the challenge was wonderful, but you know, it was a collaboration, such an interesting collaboration because of what it was asking the various collaborators to do.
Yeah, I would have been I think, Joe, you'd feel this way. It would have been a great director's challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you think, to try to do this from the point of view of the blind child?
Actually, I'm now remembering at one point, I got it into my head. We, at some point after Phil Anschutz put it down, I thought, hey, let's see if we can't get it made independently. And I thought, what if Tom directed it? And we arranged a meeting with John Leonetti, Gil.
Oh, that's
I got in touch with John Leonetti to talk to us maybe about co-directing it, being the DP, but in essence, co-directing it with Tom. And we had a conversation. It never went any place beyond that, but that was kind of I think that was the radical notion of how to maybe get it done. I would still approach it that way.
Well, you know, and I had the privilege when I was working for Landon, again, Michael Landon, on two of the episodes that I wrote for him, he would come to me at different points in a week and say, I'm leaving. You have Buzzy, the old camera cinematographer. He said, let him direct. I said, Michael, are you kidding? He said, Tom, Buzzy will keep you safe. He said, and nobody hears dialogue the way you do. So just direct. So when Alan brought this up, I thought, wouldn't that be something? Well, we're not done yet.
You know, Gil and I can tell you from personal experience, when we were doing Tales from the Crypt, it was used as the directing laboratory, the directing academy for our executive producers. And they would put a couple of first-timers, writers who they had deals with. Can the guy direct too? Sometimes just straight favors, that people who I don't think they'd even seen a movie, let alone been on a film set. And let me tell you, I can think of a few of them. You could direct the crap out of it. You could beat the shit out of them in a directing contest just by sitting in your chair and not saying anything.
Well, yeah, you know, I'm so excited that there is still, Gil and Alan, so many Cripsters around, huh? I mean, it's a marvelous, it's a marvelous, wonderful fact that what's the Shakespeare thing? The evil that men do live after them, the good is often turned with their bones.
And there you go. Fortunately, our bones are still standing, and thank goodness for nostalgia. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Now, you and I, in time, we went on to work on another script together, which one of the things that was really, I thought was most delightful about you was the world perceives you as the nicest guy on the planet. And hey, I wouldn't take that away from you. You are the nicest guy on the planet. But there's an evil Tom too.
So I brought him out, didn't we?
And what Tom really wanted to create was a blind character who everyone took for granted as being, yeah, they're nice, and really was a rat bastard.
Oh, it was wonderful. So we had the greatest time.
That was fun. That was fun.
It's fun.
That was fun. And again, we got a really good director attached. We had Alan Rudolph. And we had we had a good producer, Mary Allo, who the one, because it was all independent, of course, it was all casting dependent. And if we could just get the lead, the woman playing the blind woman.
It's a great script. Basically it's the story to the audience quickly of a cop, San Francisco cop, and the cop, he gets in all kinds of trouble because he takes down the Russian mob in ways that are totally aggressive and outside the department. And he's been suspended. And he meets a woman in a health club who happens to be beautiful and blind. And she basically brings him into her world specifically because she has the desire to attach herself to her dead husband's money. We find out in the end that she not only killed her husband, but she wants the cop to create crime for her. It's basically Body Heat with blindness attached.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. It was yeah.
And it was so much fun.
It was.
We thought we thought we had Charlize Theron.
Yeah, we nibbled it, and then the previous writer's strike happened, and everything just died.
But
everything.
Here's an interesting thought. Remember, we're talking about the need for
the need for.
Oh, fellas, I wouldn't trade our experience together every day for anything. Get it made or not get it made.
Oh, well.
I'm ready for that. My favorite Alan thing is when you go, what do you?
Sometimes words elude me, and
that's why I love it.
So it was a lovely experience. Among the people who you introduced me to, it was one more project that we got involved with, which, oh man, Roger Harrison. How did you know Roger?
Roger he really was a one-of-a-kind entrepreneur.
Yeah, he really was.
He was a Southern redneck entrepreneur who somehow got his hands on the rights to the most marvelous story of, well, Alan, you tell it because you wrote the script, and I think it's a magnificent story.
Well, what Roger wanted to tell was the true story of three cousins. The project was called Cousins, who were born really within the same year of each other, 1935 in Faraday, Louisiana. And these three first cousins grew up in this swirling gumbo of music that was coming. There was gospel and there was blues and there was stuff from the Ozarks and there was, of course, the religion. It was Assemblies of God, intense religion. And then, of course, to top it all off, there was the family relations, because in that part of the world, first cousins marry each other. And one of them grew up to be the country singer Mickey Gilley, whose Gillies was in Urban Cowboy, and all the girls look better near quitting time. Is that one of his big hits? One was Mickey Gilley. One became the televangelist Jimmy Swaggart, who fell from
Slammer, the dead in the Slammer, I don't know.
Yeah, who fell from grace not once but twice. And the third cousin was the killer Jerry Lee Lewis. And Jerry Lee and Jimmy Swaggart are first cousins on their mother's and their father's side, because it's Faraday, Louisiana. And what Roger's idea was to tell this incredible story of these three cousins and their relationship, and with all the music. The cool thing about the relationship is that Swaggart and Jerry Lee Lewis are flip sides of a really twisted coin.
Yeah.
And as much as they love each other because family, they cannot bear each other because they each have what the other one wants in some way.
Yeah, and what's amazing is that all three of them were magnificent, wonderful rock and roll players. I mean, it wasn't just Jerry.
Sure. Yeah. They were all very talented musicians. Jimmy Swaggart can play some piano when he wants to. The thing that Roger really wanted at the end of the movie was to reunite them once at a charity event at the Superdome in New Orleans, where they'd all three be up on stage playing boogie woogie piano together for the first time in 1,000 years. That was the dream.
Yeah. And
it didn't happen.
It didn't happen, but I love the fact that we have chosen, the three of us have chosen lives that allow us to have this ongoing, whether it's in books or in scripts or in music, to have this ongoing relationship with true exploration and adventure. It's this little guy, Tom, who was stuck in his backyard. It's the creative arts that have allowed me to have, not only to have this wonderful life, living very well in our 30s, but to have this creative adventure that allows us, the three of us and others, to wake up every morning with the thought that the thought can translate into something wonderful if we want to.
Indeed, it is. It's funny that the three of us are talking together. Is Gil has to step away for a second, just as I'm pointing out the three of us, but still the point is valid nonetheless. Gil and I are reunited creatively because the technology was there that made personal storytelling like this possible. And that allowed us to not only reconnect personally, but to reconnect creatively.
Yeah.
And to begin to explore things that we've never even thought about exploring before. The same thing is happening right here because it's because of the podcast. The bizarre thing is that this podcast has led to everything.
Yeah. It's so exciting. As you did when we wrote, this is an outlet I just didn't know much about, and secondly, didn't ever think I'd be involved in. And yet, had you not said to me, Tom, this is your media, this is what you're meant to do.
Oh gosh, holy cow. Now, first of all, because of stories, but also because of people that you're so much untapped potential in this universe. It's rather exciting to contemplate all the different places that, and again, it's the cool thing about podcasting is once you start telling one story in this medium, doors open to all kinds of other stories. And the next thing you know, you don't know which one to tell first.
Well, and the wonderful thing about this hour today is that this is sort of the, it's the beginning of making a cake. We've shared a whole lot of different stories related to Tom's life, but it also frames the idea that through all those experiences, molding podcasts that are meaningful to people. We talk about an against all odds kind of podcast. We talk about, I have this whole theory that I'm just the right person to do something relating to telling good news. We don't have enough of it.
Indeed.
Why wouldn't we do the Paul Harvey kind of good day circumstance where we look for stories around the world that are truly positive, because the world needs to have them. I think that's, and as much as anything, I would love to also take all the advocacy of my life around disability and tell parent stories. That there's so many. The struggle of parents with special needs kids is an ongoing, forever story. And there are, what have you and I used to say, there are 30 million special needs kids in this country. And each one of them has a story to tell.
Indeed, they do. And for the advocacy alone, it's worth taking the shot.
Yeah.
Tom, we could go on We could start a whole second hour right now and launch into the 1,000 things that I wanted to talk about, never got to. For instance, when we would sit and talk about Lakers games.
Oh, I love that conversations. Yeah.
Your understanding of the game absolutely convinced me on multiple occasions that the whole blind thing is bullshit. You see just fine, dude.
Never saw it, but that was half the thing. And listen, right now, when LeBron is doing remarkable things at 30, almost 40, it's just
mind-boggling. Yeah, I mean, it's the Lakers are not, they're not the elite team they were, but
they're not going to get there. But it's still fun to watch.
Good God, he's such a magnificent physical specimen. And speaking of physical specimens, Shohei Ohtani.
I just hope, in case of Shohei Ohtani, that there is nothing other than the fact that he got ripped off for $4 million.
Yeah.
It's when you think about it, that's again the analogy of sports. What this fellow did coming to America and doing something that hadn't been done since Babe Ruth, it's hard to comprehend.
Yeah.
For 41 and won 15 games as a starter with an earned run average of 2.31. That's otherworldly. I mean, he had 307. I mean, you can't, that's impossible to comprehend it. It really is. Well, hey, we just saw it last night. Caitlin Clark changing the landscape of women's basketball forever and ever. 41 points. The average three-pointer from outside of 27 feet, that's beyond the logo. Woo-hoo! Oh.
I told you this guy, he sees the court better than the rest of us do.
Well, I tell you, as a motivational speaker, Tom, I got to admit, I found this conversation with you very, very uplifting. And I really appreciate that for doing that.
Well, listen, now that our paths are connected through this work, let's see if we can find something else fun for the three of us to do.
Hey.
Love to.
Thank you.
Let's make that a point. Tom, thank you as always. It is so wonderful to be back in each other's lives, and thank you everybody for joining us as always, and we'll see you next time. The How Not to Make a Movie podcast is executive produced by me, Alan Katz, by Gil Adler, and by Jason Stein. Our artwork was done by the amazing Jody Webster, and Jason Jody, along with Mando, are all the hosts of the fun and informative Dads from the Crypt podcast. Follow them for what my old pal the Crypt Keeper would have called terrific crypt content.